Welcome to Deal Closers with Anette, Talie, where we focus on the deals. Our guests are real estate closers who will share in detail the whole process from finding a deal to closing it, as well as strategies and tips to help you do the same. Here is your host, Anette, Talie.
Welcome to another episode of Deal Closers. I am your host, Anette, Talie, and I'm so excited to have Whitney Sewell again on the show. Welcome, Whitney.
Happy to be here, Annette. Grateful.
So let me tell you a little bit about Whitney. He is the founder of Life Bridge Capital LLC, works with accredited investors to improve their investment returns via exceptional opportunities that multifamily syndication offers. He now has 450 doors under management, valued at approximately $50 million. Whitney hosts the Real Estate Syndication Show, a daily podcast where he now interview over 500 experts, providing cutting-edge tools and strategies of the syndication business. He and his wife, Chelsea, have 3 adopted children, 2 boys and a new baby girl. Life Bridge Capital's motto is making a difference, one investor, one child at a time. Wow, that's an amazing work you're doing with that. Can you share a little bit about it?
Of course. Our family has been, my wife and I, we've just been very blessed through the adoption process. And we have 3 children, like you said, through adoption. And the struggle, though, of the process financially as well. Most people have no idea that it can cost $40,000 to $60,000 to get a child home through adoption. And it's a real shame when there's over 160 million orphans in the world. It's like half the size of the U.S. population. And it's a very difficult process, but I like to stress to people that it's very worthwhile. And that's where, Life Bridge Capital comes in. We want to, we've committed half of our profits personally to a nonprofit that we're starting that will help families with the funding of adoption. And so we just had a call, my wife and I, with a couple last night who are, they want to adopt, but they heard the expense and they just quit. It's like, well, where is that going to come from? And so that's where we want to be able to come along beside them and say, if you will commit, we'll find a way to make it happen.
That is amazing. So tell me, how did you get into real estate? How did this start?
Yeah, you said we had 3 hours, right? So I won't go in there. So I'll go back to March of 2001. And I say March because it was before 9/11, right? It was September, when we were attacked. And we had no idea that our nation would be going to war. But I found myself just a few years later spending a year of my life in Iraq, toting around a machine gun, praying every day that I'm going to get to go home. And unfortunately, not every guy in my squad made it home. So it's hard times, right? However, that helps mold a man, right? And, and you learn a lot. But one thing I say that the military gave me was a never give up mentality. It's not an option to give up when you're in combat. And so, there's so many lives on the line. It's just not an option. And so that's what I try to keep that in mind now. And I feel like, being an entrepreneur and, having your own business, you probably just have to have that mindset. It's just not an option to give up. No is not an option, or quitting, and so, but after coming home, trying to find what I was going to do as a career, I had no idea about real estate. I wasn't raised around entrepreneurs or people in real estate. I had no idea that this option was out there or even a possibility. But I quickly got hired as a police officer with Kentucky State Police. There were 1,200 applicants for 5 positions, and I was blessed with one of those. And so, I loved working the road. I loved the structure and the discipline, being in uniform. However, I had an income problem. And so that income problem pushed me to looking for something else, and in came real estate. And my eyes were open through, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, amongst numerous other books that, I noticed that so many people had built wealth in real estate. And I thought, if they can do it, I can do it too. So we quickly purchased a couple triplexes. This was in 2009 now. Where I made tons of mistakes. It was like our own university. However, we learned a lot that's, been so valuable, for us, through the years, but still just had the never give up mentality. I eventually left the state police, became a federal agent or special agent, and that moved us to Virginia, where we're at now, still pursuing small multifamily, small single family type, thinking, okay, how many doors is it going to take for me to replace my income? Never imagining that I could purchase a 100-unit complex. Like, I would have laughed at you if you'd have told me, to even think about it at that time. And so, but my eyes were eventually open to the syndication business. I was tired of looking for more tenants and toilets and trying to manage them myself, and, just counting every nickel and penny that I could and where I could save a dime here. And so finally, I just shifted completely to the syndication business. I actually had a whole nother business going at the same time. I'm happy to get into that, but ultimately I found out that it was never going to be passive. And so my wife and I made it to sell everything related to that business. And so we could just completely commit to the syndication business. And then, years later, here we are, happy to dive into anything you feel is useful in it.
That is amazing. I mean, you just said something that resonates so much with me, which is, if they can do it, so can I. And that's one of my mottos. Like, when I look at somebody doing what I would like to do, and I look at them and I'm like, okay, if they can do it, why can't I? I mean, even like when I was super scared to get my driver license. And then I saw this lady and she's driving. I'm like, if she can do it, why can't I? So that kind of gave me the strength. So in any situation, I do the same. When I see somebody doing what I want to do, I kind of have that mentality. If they can do it, then I can too. So that's awesome. Wow. So I think not a lot of people know that, these syndicators that are doing 100 units at a time, they also started with small multifamilies, and they then realized that it was hard to scale. Right. And that's why they move into syndications.
That's exactly right. Just being able to scale much faster. But I also enjoy just like running and operating a professional business and brand, which I didn't feel that, with doing small multifamily and single family, but I love having a professional brand and working with professionals in general, whether it's our management team or brokers or whoever that is, or even our investors. I just love having that professionalism, that helps us to grow, on and on and on.
Correct.
The Deal.
All right. So let's talk about the deal. Which deal are we going to talk about today?
We'll talk about our most recent acquisition. I feel like it's relevant, especially with the market, everything that's going on right now.
Awesome. All right. So what type of asset is it and where is it located?
So it's multifamily. It's, I would say, C+, C+ property, but it's in Colorado Springs. It's a market that we are very focused on. 216 units. We really like that market. And I mean, it's had continuous growth for like 100 years, just very steady. And also my business partner, who's really our boots on the ground there, lives in Denver. So, it's very helpful since he's that close as well. And he's very skilled at what he does as well. And so it's been really useful to grow quickly in that market. And this property has helped with that a lot.
So let's deviate for a second with the deal, but how did you meet your partner? Because I think a lot of people, including me, had a struggle on finding somebody, and how do you judge this is the right person to work with you?
Great question. And partnerships can be, I've seen partnerships just ruin businesses, just time and time again, the wrong partnership, right? And it's really hard to get out of a partnership, especially once you're partnering on a deal like this, because they, in the syndication business, we may own that for 5 to 7 years or longer, and you're partnered whether you almost like it or not, for that amount of time. And so I was asked by lots of people to partner before I found Sam Rust, who's my business partner now. And I turned everybody down, and because I treat it like a marriage. I just put so much weight on this decision to partner with somebody, because I've worked so hard for many years to build a brand and to build a business, and all the trust and in relationships with all our investors and other people in the industry. And one partnership could just ruin all that. So I said no to so many people, and a lot of times it was people coming to me, like it's the first time we've ever met, and they're asking about partnering on a deal, or a deal that they already have. And it is comical, like you're laughing. I mean, but it's like, think about this, you're asking me to put everything on the line here. And it's the first time you've ever talked to me. And so, obviously I say, no, it's just not a good fit, or maybe not this deal, but maybe in the future, after we get to know each other a little better. But ultimately I was at a conference, and my wife and I have been praying for a partner for a long time. And, and I just feel like somebody that has the morals and and just that, the belief structure and things that, things outside of real estate are almost more important to me than their real estate ability. Even the people that work for us now, their integrity is more important to me. Like, we can get them trained. I can train them, or I'll get people to train them, but I can't teach you how to work hard or to be honest and things like that. It is, your integrity is so important. And so when I met Sam, we were at a large table one night at this conference, eating dinner with lots of people. I heard him talking about his faith and his family, the success he had in syndication business in a very short period of time. And I thought, okay, this guy sounds like he could be a really good fit, for a business partner. And so we had another meal the next night amongst lots of people, and got to know him a little bit better. And finally, the last night, ultimately, I just pulled him aside and said, hey, I'd love to have coffee for a few minutes. It's like 10 p.m. at night, and I was getting on an airplane at like 1 a.m. And so we had coffee, really late. We were just talking, and I just laid it out there. And I just said, I know we just met, but you really seem to fit the bill. My wife and I have been praying for a partner for a long time, and it seems like, some good potential here. And, are you interested? And he was very excited, and we talked for a long time. However, he took me to the airport, and we got to know each other a little better. He actually took me by his house. And I like to say, I got to his house at like 11:30 at night, and his wife had homemade bread and coffee ready, and I knew it was meant to be, right? So, but outside of that, we were just brutally honest with each other. And so we, not only them, we knew that that's where the relationship was going. Okay. We didn't say right then we're partnering, but we knew that's why we were going to further this conversation. And so my wife and I, and he and his wife, had numerous Zoom calls where we would talk for hours, but asking any question we could think of. Okay. How do you feel about this? Where do you see yourself 10 years from now? Where, how do you, but not just business, but like your family as well, your beliefs, your goals, all these things that we could possibly think of, because we wanted to know those before we put the rings on, right? Before we actually, commit to one another and say, we're doing this together. We want to know these things. And and I want to know that your wife believes in me as well. And my wife believes in you, and we could have a whole conversation here about marriage, but my wife, helps me think through lots of things. Even if she's not a real estate expert, she has lots of insight about, the Lord has given her insight in so many things, and I trust that. And so, we had those conversations though, but then I even also went back to his house and stayed there for 3 or 4 days at his house. And I just encourage people to think about doing that when you're thinking about partnering with somebody, because I got to see him interact with his wife and interact with his kids, and see him, taking calls or whatever it may be, but even outside of business, like actually be there with them at meals. And it was just really good insight to who he was and who his wife was, and, watch them interact. And because, believe it or not, how he interacts with her is a reflection of how he's going to interact with me to some extent, and so it's just, that was very beneficial and very worth my time. I even like our investors to know that as well. Like, I really spent a lot of time thinking through this and praying about this, and it's been very beneficial. And just knowing too that he has complementary skills to myself. We don't have the same skill sets, and it's really allowed even our skill sets to grow and flourish, because, well, now I don't have to do all the underwriting. Like, that's his specialty. He's better underwriting than I'll ever be. And I'm glad. I'm so thankful for that. But there's obviously things that I'm a lot better at that he couldn't care less about, And so, but now that we're together and we're, merge those things, now we've grown really fast.
That's amazing. And that's so very important, because you're not talking about just doing like one deal together and just, then going your other ways. You were making a decision of really merging your families together, your finances together, because if you fail, he fails, and if he fails, you fail. And that's one of the things that, keeps me from, partnering with somebody. I want somebody to be super committed the way I am. I have a family, I have a job, I have all these things, but I still put a lot of work into this, a lot of effort. So I want that person. I have so many people telling me also, I want to partner with you. I'm going to send you a bunch of deals, and then like crickets. And then 3 months later, yeah, I want to do it. that's not going to work.
Right.
It's just, I like what you said, knowing them outside of real estate, because you want to make sure that the person that you partner with has the same ideas as you, the same character, the same values, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
All right, so let's get back to the deal. But I think this is very valuable information for people that want to partner up. All right, so how did you find this deal?
So this deal was brought to us through a broker that we had worked with before, and that whole process, I feel like it's important to highlight because this deal was brought to us. We closed the deal there, 180 units in June of last year, and about the same time frame this deal was brought to us. Okay, but I'll highlight that we didn't close this deal till March of this year. Okay, but it was first brought to us in like June, July of last year. Wow. Okay, but through a broker, and I'm happy to dive into that. But I wanted to give you a chance to ask anything.
Please dive in. I think that's one of the challenges that people have, to get brokers to send you deals, to take you seriously.
Yeah. So ultimately, when the deal was brought to us, it was overpriced, as most seem to be, right?
Yes.
But we knew that. And I just encourage you to, you or have somebody on your team that really understands the numbers, and where we can say, okay, this is what it's worth. Or this is what it's worth to us. This is where we can make this deal work. This is where we can provide the most value to our investors and be confident in this opportunity. And so, ultimately the whisper price was like around $33 million, I think, for this property. But we knew that it really wasn't worth it to us until we were around 28.5 to 29 million. Okay. I mean, we knew that then, and we told the broker that, we were very upfront with him. We just said, we don't feel like that we can make it worth our while at 33, even close to 33 million. And so we stuck at that. And I just encourage you to be patient and stick to your numbers, and so don't get emotional, because, there'll be another deal next week, to pursue. And so, we stuck to that. We told him we'd be around 28.5 million, 29, something like that. And he just said, oh, no, we're not going to be around that. So we said, okay, thank you. Have a good day. Right. See you later. So we moved on to other deals, looking at other deals. And this property actually went under contract with another operator. And, a month or so into being under contract, guess what? It falls out of contract. Okay.
And I can't make the numbers work.
That's right. And it wouldn't work. I think they were around 31.5 to 32 million, under contract. I can't remember exactly what they had it under contract for, but significantly more than what we got it for. And so, but it fell out of contract. And then, of course, the broker comes back, right? He comes back to us. So he says, we know you all can close, because we closed a property, like I said, not too many months before this, that were similar size and price range. And so he said, we'd love for you all to make an offer. And we said, well, this is still about where we're at. We already know what this property is worth. But one thing I'll highlight is that because of this delay, guess what? Now it's a couple months later, and we get to see financials again on this property. So, such an important key here. We got to see financials again, and we got to, compare to what it was a few months previous. And so we noticed that the occupancy had dropped quite a bit. Okay. So, that's good to know, right?
Was that due to the current pandemic, or just because of management?
Oh, no, this is like fall of last year.
Oh, okay.
So that's before any of this stuff in the market was happening. It was like fall of 2019. And so things are still flourishing, right? But we noticed occupancy dropping, and ultimately it was just extremely poor management, a group that was self-managing really poorly. And I can even give you stories about that. But that was the biggest reason. So, but we got to see financials again. We noticed there's a problem. We tell the broker, nope, we're still at 28.5, 29 million, somewhere around there. And he says, well, no, it's not worth making an offer, but he knows where we're at. So a couple more months go by, right? He comes back, said, we still love for y'all to make an offer. Said, okay, so we did. And I think we were around 28.5 to 29 when we, put it in, just like we said. And ultimately, we get the property for about 29.5 million. And so, which was many millions less than what the other group had it under contract for. But we got financials for a third time during this process, and we still noticed occupancy drop. Okay. And so it gave us more leverage, right? It allowed us to get a better deal because we were patient and we just stuck to our numbers. And that deal didn't close till March, of the next year, even though it was first presented to us in like June or July of the year before. And so ultimately we had to be patient and we had to just stick to what we knew that would work for us. And we are so thankful, obviously, that we did now, right? I mean, we closed this deal like 2 days before the country went on lockdown, before all this, we didn't know then, obviously, that all this was going to happen. But we're so grateful that we stuck to our numbers, because if we hadn't, we'd be in trouble now,
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we stuck to our numbers, and we have an amazing reserve budget. We can get into some of that, but we're still sleeping good at night because of having patience, sticking to our numbers, and other things that we did to prepare.
Yeah, and I think that's where we as investors get in trouble, right? When we just get emotional about the deal and we just want to get it. And, what if I just put a little bit more? If I just, instead of sticking to your numbers, you just like, what if I add a little bit more to the number and then I can get it?
Right.
And I am grateful. My husband is my bring me back to the ground. And he's like, no, stick to the numbers.
Right.
He's awesome at doing that. All right. So we talk about how did you find it and the listing price. So how did the negotiation go once you sent your, you kind of negotiated like 3 times, but then once you send your official offer, you had already looked at the financial. Was there any other negotiation after that?
We didn't retrade, which is, is a term, you hear a lot, people, you don't want to retrade, right? If you can keep it all from it. However, there are times where it's a must. I mean, you're not going to pay $2 million too much for a property after you find out there's big issues just because you don't want to retrade, right? However, you don't want to be somebody that's known to retrade, but we've done a lot of due diligence beforehand. Just because we had all that time, we had looked at the property numerous times. We almost knew what problems. And another thing I just thought of was our management team has been in that market since the early 90s. Okay. They've been there for 30 years, and they know this market so well. And one key thing, though, is that our management team managed this property for 5 or 6 years, like 5 or 6 years before we purchased it. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So they knew this property so well. They gave us so much insight. Like, you really need to look at these things, or this is what was repaired when we managed it. I mean, like, that was so valuable. That's why that team member is so crucial. But they know this market so well. They've been there so long, and they had even managed this property and provided amazing insight. And so we knew lots of those things going in. Obviously we get their opinion on underwriting and what they feel like the market, can hold here, as far as pushing rents, and because they know those things so well, and, managing thousands of units, they just really have a pulse on the market. And so, that was very beneficial. And then moving forward with that property, I mean, they've just continued to just be an amazing team member.
And you mentioned the vacancy rate was higher and higher every time you look at this property. What was the percentage when you offered on the property?
Yeah. So I think we were in the like mid 70s, percentage, as far as occupied. And so, that was one reason we had to go with bridge debt, as well, because it wasn't considered stabilized. And I would also say that, why your management team is so important, but a way that we didn't want it to be 70% occupied. I don't remember, it was in the low 70s when we actually put it under contract. But we didn't want it there when we closed, right? And so ultimately we have another property that's 180 units. It's about a half a mile from this one. And all of this property is mostly 2 bedrooms. And we had another property there where the 2 bedrooms have just done amazing. I mean, so much better, in 6 months than we ever projected the whole life of the deal. And the 2 bedrooms were 100% occupied. So as tenants come there, obviously if they're wanting a 2 bedroom and we don't have it, where do you think we're sending them? We're sending them to this property. We have it under contract, and ultimately we're raising the value of the property before we ever put it under before we ever close on it, right? And so, we had the occupancy almost 80% by the time we closed on it. Okay, and so these are people that the word has just left me, but we're qualifying. Yes. We're qualifying these tenants and sending them to our new property before we even close. And so we're raising that occupancy, raising the value before we ever close.
That's an amazing idea. on how to, raise equity. So for people that don't know, why did you go from an agency loan to a bridge loan, right? Like, can you expand on that?
Sure. So, bridge debt is it usually means there's some type of, it's a bridge to get to, to have a stabilized property, or maybe it's a large rehab and you have to vacate half the property to do it. Sometimes that's, you have to do that. And during that time, you're not going to have as much income. There's going to be reasons, but we have, this property has the income. However, to get agency debt, they want it to be stabilized property. So, at least 80 to 90% occupied, right? And so this property was under that. So we couldn't even apply for agency debt. So we had to go the bridge route. And so, there's some negatives, obviously. Sometimes it's just 3-year, term on bridge debt. And so, but we have a 3-year term with 2 1-year extensions. And so we know we have 5 years. However, sometimes with agency debt, you may get 10 years, which would be preferred. But that doesn't mean we're not going to do the deal. And also with bridge debt, you may have a floating rate, meaning that, your interest rate can float a little bit. And I feel like that there's a stigma there, though, that seems so negative and people steer away because of floating rate. But ultimately, I've heard some very sophisticated people who've lots more experience than me, talk about how like 1% of bridge debt, like actually, float much at all or go way too high or, kill a deal. So it's such a low percentage, but also we purchase what's called a cap, meaning we know that the rate is only going to go so high. And then we account for that. If the rate was this high forever, can we still provide our, investor or projected returns and things like that? So it's ultimately, we don't feel like there's a ton of risk other than knowing we have to refi or sell within, say, 5 years. That's really our biggest risk. And that comes back to our planning. By the end of year 2, we're going to be planning that exit, and making sure, we're making sure we're on track all the time, but we're really thinking about it way early, making sure we're going to achieve that one way or the other.
Absolutely. And I think the financing was like in the perfect time, because right after you closed, probably all the financing terms changed.
Yes.
Right?
Our lender actually texted us that night that we closed and said, you were the last deal we pushed through for the next 30 days.
Wow. How lucky, because I've heard of people being canceled on the closing table. Like the bank backed out last minute.
That's right. Yes.
So
or 2 days before. I've heard lots of stories like that.
All right. So how did you fund the deal? I know that this was a syndication. So can you tell our listeners how does that work?
Yeah. So how does the debt or the equity?
The syndication, how does the syndication work in terms of funds? How do you?
So ultimately there's a portion that we're raising from investors, right? Who are also called limited partners. We're raising, whether it's the down payment, whether we're doing a capex budget, meaning what we're going to use to renovate the property, things like that, or a reserve budget, operating budget, things like that. We're raising that money from investors who want to invest passively, meaning, we're not calling them to ask, what paint color to use. However, they're making a great return. They're investing in our operations and me as an individual, and as an operator, in our relationship more than anything, but they get to invest. So they're a big part of that. But then also, obviously, we have to get debt. We have to find a lender who's going to lend on this property. We have to find somebody who believes in us as well on that side to raise that side of the debt as well. And so, just thinking about, what is that loan to purchase and things like that. But we also raised a massive reserve budget. And so we have just this massive reserve budget sitting over here in the bank. So any rainy day, and again, I like to stress, like it was before, this all coronavirus, all this stuff happened. And I was even questioned by many experienced operators about this large reserve budget, because it does lower the returns. Right? Mm-hmm. It does lower the returns to investors somewhat to have this reserve budget over there. But I'll tell you, in the same week, our country was shut down, and guess what? Us and our investors can still sleep at night, and we are still able to provide our distributions. Okay. Because we planned for this. We'd actually planned for 30% vacancy for the whole first year. And we're not even close to that, even with all this mess happening right now, so just being extremely conservative, having that reserve budget, and like I said, we can also sleep good because of it.
That is amazing. But you didn't know about the coronavirus. So what was the purpose of that reserve initially?
just because of something like this potentially happening. We still want to know we can still operate. We still want to know we can still pay our bills. Worst comes to worst, we want to be able to weather that storm. If 2 buildings burn down, we want to still be able to operate. We still want to be able to get them built back. Even that is alone. Some people don't realize that a lot of times, the insurance companies will make you provide the money somehow to build a building back before they'll actually refund you, or you got to have some capital somewhere. Right.
Right.
And so that's the biggest reason. I mean, we always want a large reserve budget and ultimately to protect our investors and ourselves and just the operations of the property.
What percentage did you use for your reserve?
Yeah. So great question. Ultimately, like we have $1.5 million in a reserve budget for this property. Okay. And, some people say they want like 1 month of operating expenses or 2 months of operating expenses. And honestly, that's just not near enough for me. It's just not near enough for me. I want to be able to fund investor returns for 2 years. If something just even worse than the coronavirus happens, and we can. With that budget, we can fund investor returns or distributions for 2 years if we had to. Some people say, well, that's a return of capital. Well, to some extent, yes, at that point, if it got that bad, but we're still not at that point. Like I said, and ultimately planning for like a 30% vacancy for the whole first year, again, we're doing better than that still, even taking over a property that had extremely poor management. And that's why it's in the shape it's in. We're still able to bring our management team in and improve that property and still perform better than we expected even during this crisis.
That's amazing. I think a lot of syndicators they had to cut their distributions to investors during this time, and you were prepared for it. So that's amazing.
That's not always bad. It is, you do want enough cash in the bank, right? But it was, and to give you an idea, like a distribution for 1 month is like 2% of the capital that we have in the bank, so we can still pay distributions easily and still weather a big storm.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about the challenges that your management company had to deal with once you took over.
Yeah. Obviously we took over right during this big mess. Right. And, we didn't know all the tenants yet. Our team who just took over the leasing office, had to go immediately virtual, right? Or they had to immediately operate without having an office, or a place where tenants can come into. So immediately doing polls, immediately calling every tenant to figure out, okay, what's your job situation? We are kind of the new kids on the block, right? We're the new management team, and we want to express to them that we care about you. We want to work with you. Like I said, the week that we took over, like within 2 days, all of a sudden they can't leave their apartment, and so, we started doing numerous polls, calling them, texting, emailing to figure out, okay, what's your job situation? What type of industry do you work in? What kind of percentage of job loss do we expect? So ultimately we can project, say next month, we're going to have this many tenants that don't have jobs. We know that if they don't work for a couple of weeks, they can't afford rent a lot of times, right? It's unfortunate, but it's the truth. And so, they're hardworking people, but they have to have a job. They have to have the job. And so we calculated about 4% at that time of tenants that would possibly lose their job. And we were thrilled with that. Right. We were thrilled with just 4% because we know lots of operators who are, more than double that, that are losing tenants that are losing jobs. So, that was just a few things. Obviously the communication barrier, right? We have to be careful about going and knocking on people's doors. All right. Thankfully, we had already done due diligence. Myself and our team had already toured every unit, before all this happened. And so, all that wasn't an issue yet. But those were some barriers. And thankfully, because of, texting and phone calling and emailing, we can still communicate with everybody and still show that we care, still show that we're trying to work with them, even though they're experiencing a very hard time.
That is awesome. I think there was a lot of question in the first weeks of the pandemic going on if you should be either proactive or reactive, right? How should you do the management? And I had, people that are very experienced that they were like, no, we're not saying anything. We're just waiting for the rent at the end of the month. And if it doesn't show up, then I'm going to talk to them.
That's too late.
Yes. And I was like, what do I do? Like I was thinking about it. I only had at the time 12 tenants of my own. So I was like trying to decide. And every day I would hear somebody experience say the opposite. So I ended up calling each one of my tenants. And I think it was the best approach for me in my situation because I could foresee who was going to be late. And then I could also find out who was still working. And at that time, everybody was still working, which was great. A couple told me, a couple of them told me that they may be having reduced hours, but then I was prepared for it. So that was definitely a good move for me. And so now we're, seeing that they are getting their stimulus checks and hopefully they will be able to do their next month's rent too.
Communication is key all the time, with team members and with tenants, and you have to remember that it's a very stressful time for them. For so many people in our country right now, such a large percentage obviously is on unemployment now. But it's a very stressful time. They're trying to put food on their table and, they're worried about getting kicked out of their apartment when they have no job. I mean, very stressful time. And I think that just that phone call goes a long ways to say, hey, we understand, we see what's happening, and we want you to communicate with us. Ultimately, it's going to push a lot of people just to be silent, as a tenant, because they don't want to talk to you because they're afraid you're going to kick them out. Yeah. Right. And so we want to be proactive and say, no, we're here to help you. We understand. Like, we don't want you to go anywhere. Even if you can't pay your rent next month, we're not trying to kick you out, but we want you to communicate with us and let us know these things.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I think showing them that you care also changes their approach to you, because there is a lot of movement of don't pay rent. But if you're seeing that your landlord is, worrying about you and like is communicating with you, you're going to have less of a percentage of people trying to do that, right?
Right.
All right. So what is your exit strategy? We talked a little bit about it, but what's your final goal with this property?
Yeah. So, we will exit in say 5 years or earlier, probably earlier than that, but that's something I talked a little bit about earlier. We'll be planning that, we were already planning it, but long before we ever bought it, but ultimately we'll be putting some concrete to that plan in say year 2. We'll know how many renovations have been done. We'll understand, we'll know, that the market rent has done what we projected or better, and exactly what our income levels are, and just see that growth, up to that point. And so we'll be able to say, okay, in year, say 3.5 to 4, we've accomplished our goal, or we've accomplished our projections for investors. And so we'll look to exit right then. And say beginning of year 4, we'll sell the property, or, if let's say this virus and everything just gets so much worse, just by chance it gets worse, and we can't achieve that goal, say by year 2 or 3 that we thought we would be, then obviously we'll be looking to refinance, right? The property will be stabilized. The rents will be better. We'll do a refi. We'll pay out, a large amount, to our investors, returning lots of capital, but they'll still be invested in the deal. I like to add that, they'll still be invested in the deal, but we'll return a lot of their capital, and then we may keep it for 5 more years, something like that. So
I think that's the advantage of it. There's options, right?
That's right. There are definitely options, and investors know, that's our plan in the beginning, to have a 5-year hold and to exit, say in year 4, something like that, or before, depending on what the market's doing. But, they are also trusting us and our expertise and experience that, let's say in year 3.5 or 4, we're just, because of this virus or whatever, because of what's happened, we're not where we wanted to be, and it's not the best time in the market to sell, depending on what's happening. Then we're going to do a refi, or we're going to hold the property for a few more years, and that's why they're investing in us and with us.
Absolutely, and also the advantage is that the property is not valued necessarily just at the market, but at the income of the property itself, correct? So
that's correct.
If there is a problem in the economy, the property, if you're renovating it and the rents are going up and your income is going up and your expenses are going down, then your value is still gonna go up, correct?
That's right. We still own a property. I like to tell people, like, if you just had all your money in the stock market, you just watched, 30-40% of it vanish. Right? I mean, just gone. Part of it may have come back, part of it leaves again. You don't know where it's at, right? It's gone. You can't just go get it. You can't see it. But when all this happened, we didn't have 4 buildings just vanish. They're still there. right? Investors can go see them and touch them and watch things operate. They can walk the property with us. We still have the property. We still have so much control over that investment, in our operation. So you're right. If we increase the income, we increase the value of the property. And even if we have to hold it another year, which, isn't the end of the world, right? It didn't just vanish, right? You're still making money, a preferred return, at least, preferably a lot more than that, by that time, as opposed to it just vanishing.
Awesome. And you had a really good plan, you had really good reserve, but did the pandemic change any of the plans that you had at the beginning?
Of course. So all capex stuff, all renovations are just on hold, other than, like, say, safety related things, like cleanup around the property. Property had lots of trash around it, which is something you kind of want to see when you're looking for properties, right? And so lots of trash, lots of just mismanagement. We had somebody secret shop the property before we bought it, and our team member went up to the door. It was 5 till 10. The sign on the door said we open at 10. She knocks on the door, and somebody comes to the door, opens the door, and says, "We open at 10. Come back later." I mean, just, it was 5 minutes, right? It was that simple things like that, like just extremely poor, mismanaged. But obviously when we took it over, we planned to start that renovations immediately, on all the vacant units, and then just start turning units over. But obviously that's on hold. That's one of the biggest changes. Obviously the communication level with tenants has gone up, but in a very different method than we expected. Right. So obviously we didn't just give up, but we find a different method or way to communicate. But renovations, things like that have obviously been the biggest thing that we've had to put on hold. And then just holding tenants. Like we want retention, right? A vacant unit pays you nothing. Mm-hmm. Like no matter what, it's never going to pay you anything just to be empty. That I know of anyway, and so, even if somebody can't pay for a month during this crazy time, or even 2 months, if they're a good tenant, like, we want them to stay, and so, thinking through things like that, we've never allowed partial payments in the past, but guess what? Now there's an exception, right? There has to be an exception. We're going to work with them. We want them to stay.
Yeah. And so these units that are vacant, and empty, and you were planning to do renovations, are you planning to rent them the way they are, or are you going to keep them empty?
So we may just not renovate them to the level that we were looking at, at the beginning. We may just do, obvious repairs, safety related things that have to be done. And then as people want units, we're gonna rent them. We're going to fill them up. We've actually rented quite a few units over the last few weeks, and so surprisingly. And so people are not trying to move, but however, there are people that are still needing places to go. And so if they're qualified, we're still renting those units, but we're not going to spend all the capital, let's say $5,000 to $7,000 to bring them, where we wanted, when we can't rent them at that level at this time. Like, we know we're not going to do that right now. And so we're going to get them rent ready. But then, we're going to rent them to people that are qualified, but we're not going to, like I said, going to put all that capital into them at this time.
Absolutely. That's a smart way to do it, because you want to keep the vacancy low. You want to keep filling up your requirements. And I was really worried. I had one tenant leaving at the end of this month. And, when people call me because I manage myself and I have just, 12 units, I keep their numbers. And I tell them that if something opens up, I will let you know. So I had this person contact me a couple of times. And so this guy, I kept asking me, are you still living? Are you still living? Because I thought maybe he's not in the middle of this mess, but he decided, yes, he's leaving. So I called this person that had been calling me for months, and I'm like, I have one, and I rented it like in one day.
Wow.
So I was very lucky to have that system in place, right? That I keep the numbers of the people that are calling me. And so I called the first person that I called, he took the apartment, and he was already kind of qualified because I already had spoke with him many times, and he still had to do the application. But there's still people looking for housing even right now.
Yes, for sure.
Expert tips.
All right, so now we go to the part of the show where you're going to give me 3 expert tips. And I was talking to Whitney, and he's going to give us 3 tips on how to maximize your productivity using a VA, a virtual assistant.
virtual assistants have changed my business. And, a few things that you need to know. Well, doing a daily podcast pushed me to grow a team that weren't all in the office, right? Other people that have specific skills. And so one thing about using a virtual assistant is you have to know what you're using them for. Okay. You have to think about, is it this one task over here? Because you can hire them to be really good at this one task. It could be data entry. It could be research. It could be editing audio for a podcast. It could, this one specific thing. Or are you looking for somebody that's, say, that amazing executive assistant that's really going to be your right hand and help you with lots of things? Because it's two separate types of hires. Okay. This person over here, that's the executive assistant, I'm going to do a background credit check on, and, maybe a series of interviews, and different things, because they're my right hand, and they play such a large role, and they have access to lots of information, so I have to know who they are. And I want to make sure there's somebody that's going to stay long-term, where this person over here, they may do something for me numerous days a week, but it's just this like one revolving task. They don't have access to systems or portals or emails or CRMs, things like that. But, so I just need to know that they're skilled at that one thing, right? And another thing you need to think about is when you're advertising for a VA, your job description is key. So, the title and the job description, you want to be very detailed in what, and what you're looking for, what you're using them for. They need to know right away. And because you're going to waste a lot of time interviewing people if you didn't have a good job description. Okay. And in that job description, I always like to make a way for people to stand out. Okay. So briefly, in maybe like a half a sentence in the last paragraph of my job description, I'll have a list of things I need them to be able to do or be good at, depending on what it is. But I'll even, especially from like this executive assistant position, I'll put a little sentence in there that says, if you're serious about this position, send me a video application. Okay. And I won't say anything else about it. Okay. But then I'll see who actually went that extra mile, right? To give me that, that little extra detail there. Who paid attention to that? I may also
read it.
What's that?
Who read it completely?
That's right. That's exactly right. I'll have people say they read it, but they will never mention that. I may also say, give me a description of how you fulfill the roles above. I'll give them a list of things that they need to know how to do, and send me that on one page in PDF format. Okay. And that's all I'll say about that. And then, I'll have people that send me amazing answers, but they send it to me in a Word document, and that may sound silly, but it helps me to see there, just are they paying attention to every detail? Are they really thinking through this? Do they really care about this position? Because ultimately, if not, if they halfway did it or didn't do it at all, because you'll see copy and paste stuff, all the time of just their resume. But then, I use Upwork a lot, to find those people, and I'll, hire them through Upwork and use the Upwork platform, to even pay them for a long time. But then ultimately, how do you keep them on board? And it's something that I've worked on a lot more recently is, like showing them that they're part of the team. Right? They have to feel wanted. They have to feel like their job is necessary and that they're contributing. And so it's something I've had to work on and revamp. Even just recently, I've been trying to hire somebody for this executive assistant position again. And it's been really difficult to find somebody that really has the high level of integrity and morals but is skilled as well. And it's not as easy as you may think. And so I've been conducting lots of interviews, but I say, conduct an interview and ask questions about not just their skill set, but ask them about who they are. Ask them about what they like to do on the weekend. I like to ask, what are the 5 most important things to you? And that's it. Like, what are the 5 most important things to you? And because that's going to show me a lot about who they are, and it's going to allow me to lead into a lot more questions about what's important to them. And they may say, well, you mean personally? And I'll just say, any way you want to answer it. What are the 5 most important things to you? And, and the top 2 things are going to tell me a lot about them. You're going to hear family and kids and, their work and things like that. But there's still a couple more things there. They got to dig just a little bit to really tell me a little more about them. Because that's, again, just like finding that business partner, that's more important to me. If they're editing a podcast, that's not always the case. I don't have to know those details, right? I just send me some files, or maybe I send you a file of a raw podcast, and allow you to do a little work and me to see your work. And ultimately then, show me some references and we're kind of good, But ultimately this executive assistant's a very different hire. So I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, that's amazing information. I mean, I love the fact that you are, asking them for a specific task. And then if they don't do it, then they are not paying attention to detail. If
Right.
a position that you are looking for, you need somebody that needs to pay attention to the detail, then, you weed out a lot of people that didn't pay attention.
That's right. You can spend a lot of time doing interviews and you didn't have to.
Right. I've been hiring and using a lot of, virtual assistants in the last 6 months. And, one of the things that was driving me crazy is like I would send them all these things I want them to do, and then I would get the result and it wasn't 100%. So I just made a list, and it was like a checklist. Before you send me a file, check that all of these things are done. And it was like problem solved, right?
Wow.
Because they had to do this before, like it was mostly for editing of the videos. Check the quality and check that the logo and check that this is done and the music and the sound and the volume.
And I would hope that you didn't have to do that. You know what I mean? Like I would like to find somebody that knows to do that before I have to tell them.
Right. But, it was for me, it was also, starting to do it. Right. So I had to do like a system. So I did the first video or the first couple of videos by myself. And then I was like, how do I get somebody to do it the way I want it? Right.
Yeah,
so then I made this guide of what I want. But then I really like working with him because I work with other people, but I didn't like necessarily working with them. But I like to work with this guy. So I said, okay, if I make you a checklist, and then he's doing it awesome since then. So I guess I understood how the system works. I heard a lot of people talking about have your systems before you start hiring other people. And I really didn't understand what it meant until I did that. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that's a system because then he can follow it and then we're going to do it.
Sure.
Absolutely. Whitney, this has been an amazing episode. Thank you so much for adding so much value to my audience. I had a lot of fun learning, and I can believe it's been already an hour. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And
happy to be here.
And for people that want to get in contact with you, where can they find you?
Go to lifebridgecapital.com. You can email me, Whitney at lifebridgecapital.com. You can call or text 540-585-4338. I'd love to connect. You can go to our website and you can find a sheet there that we created for passive investors that tell you the pros and cons of investing in a real estate syndication deal and things you need to know before you invest. Maybe things you need to ask the operator, things you need to talk to your CPA about, different things like that. But also, if you have a listener who is looking to adopt a child, my wife and I have numerous calls with couples. We just did last night as well with couples who are looking to adopt and don't know how to get started. And we would love to help you any way that we can. So please reach out.
Wow, that's an amazing cause. Thank you so much, Whitney.
My pleasure.
This was Deal Closers with Anette Talie, brought to you by Talie Investments. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. Our goal is to provide amazing value on your real estate journey. Connect online at www.talieinvestments.com, where you can find this episode and more. Did you like this episode? Subscribe, like, and share.